is the panel for Beyond Chatbots, practical generative AI use cases. So just making sure that you are all attending that same one. We are actually going to start with introductions. I'll start with my own. My name is Amit Dingare. I'm the Chief AI Officer at a company called PRGX Global. I started my career in data science as a demand forecaster. So I used to do a lot of statistical forecasting for retail. And when machine learning came along, I made my way into that, then deep learning, and now the whole rage is about Gen AI. So at PRGX, we actually try to recover money for our clients, mainly retail clients, using source-to-pay optimization. So we look at the procurement processes and look at accounts payable processes to find optimization opportunities. And we're trying to use AI to make those processes better. So that keeps me excited, and here to talk about some of those at work. With that, I'm going to pass it on to Sachin.
Hi, my name is Sachin More. I'm part of the Dollar General merchandising supply chain team. My role at DG is focused mostly on optimizing the whole supply chain, making sure our store shelves are not going empty, and of course helping our business using the machine learning AI to see how can we enhance our business for the next level. In my previous role, I was a senior consultant at a company called Harman International. Even though Harman was popular for making music devices, but we had a vertical for services where I mostly focused on ERP implementations for several retailers across US, Europe, and Asia. Very excited to be here, and hopefully we'll have a great dialogue here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Becca Anderson. I'm the Senior Director of Multiplatform Audience Analytics at EW Scripps. We're a media organization. We own 42 local news stations and 9 national entertainment networks. I work over all of our streaming products, so trying to move a traditional broadcast media organization into the streaming and direct-to-consumer world. Spent a lot of time in media, have also spent time at what was Turner, now Warner Brothers, and then also spent a little bit of time in e-commerce, but media's got my love and my heart.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sergey Fogelson, and I lead the Enterprise Data Science Organization at TelevisaUnivision. So like Becca, I am on a work within a traditional media organization trying to pivot into digital. So TelevisaUnivision is the largest Spanish language broadcaster in the, really in the world, but it's definitely the largest in the United States. We have linear channels, we have cable channels. We also have a streaming product called VIX. It's also the largest natively Spanish video streaming application on the planet. Check it out, it's great. So my organization focuses on basically personalization for that application, as well as building data products to try to grow and sustain our large Spanish language media audience across basically linear and digital. Yep, that's me.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Ahmad Haider. I'm a Senior Director of Data and Advanced Analytics at Vertex Pharmaceuticals. Vertex is a biotech company based out primarily in Boston with global presence. Like Amit mentioned, my career in data science also started a long time ago. Amit and I actually worked together in one of the companies together called Cotivity. It's still out in Sandy Springs, so you can go visit it too. I have worked in data science in a couple of different organizations in different domains. Many of them were companies in Atlanta, things like AGCO, Honeywell, etc. I think one of the things that I learned through this entire process is data science is a topic that is not limited to a particular industry or a particular domain, and we are seeing that just in the panelists say itself. But it really applies to all the different industries. So we're really hoping this panel, and with the expertise that we are bringing here, would help inform some of those decisions. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Ahmad. So the reason we chose this topic is, I think, whenever I talk to people about, hey, are you applying Gen AI, and if so, how? the most common answer I get is, hey, we are building a chatbot. Okay, that's kind of like where people think about GenAI application. And in my mind, that's probably not using the potential of GenAI to its kind of like maximum. An example is I'm trying to book a vacation, right? And typically there is a chatbot where it asks me questions, I answer those questions, and then it kind of like takes that and processes that information and helps me kind of like do that. Well, that experience, first of all, is too lengthy. I really wish that that chatbot, instead of like asking that question, if I can give it temporary access to my calendar, it knows where I'm going or want to go, it will go and plan the whole itinerary for me, right? That's kind of the better experience for us. So I think, and there is a potential for GenAI to be in that domain, specifically using agents. So I thought maybe let's have people from the industry come together and discuss that application, right? So with that, I think we are going to start with our questions. And this is probably, I'm going to start with Sachin, you, since you're the first one. Beyond chatbots, what GenAI applications are you most excited about?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And with the confidence on GenAI today, which I think all of us know, it's not super high. So I would say, I would talk about two use cases. So the first one being insights from dashboards, right? Today, I think in organizations, we have several verticals, several functions, and every function has its own KPI dashboards, or they have their own key performance indicators, we popularly call, and they make their own decisions based on that. And I think those dashboards are very static in nature, to my knowledge, right? For example, let's say I'm asking from my or I'm building a dashboard that talks about top 100 selling items in my store. It really becomes a very static KPI. But with the use of GenAI, we could target the lower 100 performing items. Or I may want to look at what are my top categories that are doing good in my store, or what am I shipping the most from my warehouse, right? So that's one definite use case. I feel there's a lot of potential there where GenAI can come in and make it a more dynamic dashboard versus static that we're dealing today. So that's my first use case. I would say is very exciting, and I'm really looking forward to see how can we implement that. Coming to the second use case, I think code generation. It's no secret that a lot of the enterprises are operating on a legacy platform today. Like everywhere you go, I mean, I would share my experience. I was at a Marriott hotel, and when I went to the reception, I see there is this AS400 mainframe UI, right? I mean, they work fine. There's no complaint about that. But then if I have to really convert this code into a more Java or JavaScript kind of platform, I can definitely use GenAI to do that for me. And that's kind of do a heavy lifting for you. So I think those are the two use cases definitely I think are very promising to my knowledge.
Great. Yeah. Becca?
Yeah, so in the media space, especially in streaming, content discoverability, and not only within our products, but you may know this, is Sergey, going across the walled gardens, so being able to look across Netflix and Disney and Peacock and get to content discoverability from the user experience. Again, wish list, because the walled gardens have to let us do that. And then the other one is really product optimization. So in our app design or web design, getting to a place where it's a personalized template. So less the content and more the delivery and the wrapper around the content.
I think on my side, I would probably be, within media, I would probably echo what Becca was saying. I think that content enrichment, so not actually making stuff, like I don't think I'm going to be watching a fully AI-generated movie, I would say, in the next 5 years. But from the perspective of knowing very quickly that these specific actors were in this specific scene, and for example, being able to automatically tag a a piece of content with a specific set of moods or with a specific set of keywords. Those kinds of things are going to operationally transform the way that we mine whatever content libraries we have access to in order to, for everything, right? Like for ad sales use cases, for evaluation of talent use cases, for and potentially for like storylining use cases around the kinds of narrative arcs that your specific audience is like really, really like and that really resonate with them. So I think that kind of this ability to tag all of our content correctly and then be able to use those tags to then make informed decisions around what gets made and who we sell opportunities to advertise with us against that content for. Does that make sense? So I think that's a really cool thing. I really don't think, I think I would challenge a little bit this idea of code generation with chatbots, like with Copilot or Gemini, or pick whatever flavor of LLM you want. I myself have found significant challenges using those tools. I think where the opportunity exists is more like in code translation, maybe, where you go from, you have a code base in language A and you just want to transform it into language B. I think that's possible. I do not think, and again, I'm fine with making predictions because it's going to be wrong anyway, but I do not expect in the next 5 years to see an actually fully competent end-to-end like developer that is an AI. Like I don't see that happening. Yeah.
Thanks. Ahmad?
Maybe I'll just add a little bit because I think we covered almost like everything in the breadth. I think drawing on my experience and what I have seen, areas in healthcare, things like personalized medicine has a lot of opportunity. I think that's an area that has been almost a space that has not been fully explored, and the value that generative AI can bring to that particular topic, especially given the amount of data that we collect about a given human, and how do we marry it with all the other data sets that you have available, necessarily without the context that you need to provide for every patient. I think that could have significant value. The other thing I think it was mentioned is, I think Gen AI's creative abilities are like totally surpass any other deep learning or previous to that ML abilities. So things like design, whether those are like material design type of topics, whether those are structured design, I think those are really representative. So for example, when I worked in semiconductors, you have to design a particular structure or a particular layer or a coating on top of a chip, and that decides how it will behave. I think those design elements could be really, really valuable.
Great answers. Yeah, I think maybe I can just add one thing. Where I'm finding a lot of value on top of all these things mentioned is in the information retrieval, right? If you have to retrieve information from large amount of text corpus or large amount of images and get a summarization of that, I think large language models are quite good, especially now the visual large language models that have come out, they're really good at that. All right, moving on to the next one. I'm going to basically choose some speakers for this one. How can Gen AI transform industries like healthcare, finance, and manufacturing? I know we touched upon that somewhat in the earlier question, but would love to see if there are additional answers to that. So maybe we'd start with Ahmad, you?
I think I touched on this a little bit. Maybe one additional topic I could add is, with Gen AI, you could get into drug discovery. That could have potential to significantly advance that. We knew that Google had DeepMind, which was really something that was powerful for structured design. With Gen AI, especially with this concept of unstructured data that exists outside the typical structured domains, you would be able to leverage that using all the different, using all the idea of like being able to connect elements of data that are not really in sequence. I think that has really great benefit.
Sergey, do you want to add anything?
I mean, I want to kind of maybe pass it along because I have basically no experience in industries outside of media, and I don't want to talk about topics that I know very little about.
All right. Okay. All right. We can move on. So I think this is a very good question, and I think we all probably should think about chime on this one. When you implement Gen AI, right, we all face challenges, right? what are some of the key challenges you have faced in implementing Gen AI, either in your work or what do you anticipate as key challenges? Sachin, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I think in my experience, the biggest pushback was the IT security protocol that at least I was trying to implement. I think there's a sense of fear within the organization saying like, okay, and of course, we all know that data is our intellectual property and we want to make sure we don't compromise anything of that, right? So, so I think that's one of at least the challenges I have faced in the past. So the IT security, the data security pieces, which I think are the most challenging pieces. And then beside that, the combination of the SLM and LLM, right? So at some point in time, you may also want to make sure you are consuming what's in the market versus what you already have. And for you to do that, you need to bring those two models together. And I think that's where the line needs to be drawn. So that's one of the challenges, at least I'm facing as a professional, that where do we draw the line or how do we get them together to work as one single producer for me, right? So yeah, those are my thoughts on this.
Okay. Becca?
Yeah, to pick up a bit on what Sachin was saying, you mentioned fear, and that's definitely something we're experiencing at Scripps, where it is a traditional broadcast organization. So even when we can create proofs of concept, there's still getting buy-in across the organization. So we may have buy-in up, but we may not have buy-in laterally or down because there's a sense of fear. What does this mean? What will this do to my role? And then also, again, being a legacy broadcaster, that means legacy tech infrastructure. So you build a proof of concept that may have difficulty translating or scaling into infrastructure that exists. So being able to bring those two together earlier on in the proof of concept, those are two big issues that I'm seeing.
Sachin?
On my side, I think the two biggest challenges in general around generative AI are around security and then around verifying correctness. So from the security perspective, an LLM unleashed within your environment is basically like a completely untethered open client that is connected to both the internet and to all of your organizational, basically, data infrastructure. That thing can be exploited, like, pretty easily. So I frankly would not want anything like that embedded within my organization unless I was 100% sure that all hell couldn't break loose via some kind of either weird failure mode or via some malicious actor basically getting access to the LLM. Because like it would just be chaos. Especially if you have like whatever, you're like, oh yeah, we used RAG, and then now the LLM has access to condensed versions of all of the information that you have stored in your databases. Like it's just a recipe for disaster. So that's the security perspective. I think from the other perspective, it's the validation of the outputs of the model. I think at the end of the day, no company right now is certain enough to fully be able to deploy an end-to-end LLM model without some kind of human in the loop somewhere. I think, and it's because you can't test all possible failure modes. In traditional, like, what we called ML and AI before ChatGPT, you have like 7 or 8 or 2 or 100 classes, and you know how to look for failures in those things. You can't do that with this anymore. Or if you do, it's very expensive and it takes a long time. And the failure modes, because it's a completely nonlinear system, are really weird and very hard to spot, but they're everywhere, right? And so what winds up happening is you have to have, when you're training your model, you have to have an army of humans or several highly caffeinated humans that are validating every one of your outputs. And that's just for an internal application, right? Like, so I talked about this metadata stuff. I talked about it because we're doing that right now, right? We're taking our content library and we're passing it through various different fancy alphabet soup LLMs and getting back labels. And we're seeing that just randomly, it'll just write garbage, which is complete garbage. You gave it the same exact input, and yet its output is just random strings of characters, like literal slop. not even meaningful in any sense of the term. But it's completely unknown when it'll happen. Sometimes it'll happen on this. You run the same exact title through the model, you get good results 2 times, and then the 3rd time it's slop. Like what? Why? No idea, because it's got 3 billion parameters, right? So I think that is a huge challenge for productionizing things for whether internal or external Gen AI applications.
I think you covered everything in there. I'll just add one additional point in there. Intellectual property, because you need to use a lot, you need a lot of data, and as we know, like all the big companies and all the smaller companies now, you need data outside your organization, and that's where intellectual property comes in.
Yeah, I probably would add a couple of more based on my experience. There is a lot of tribal knowledge that still sits in people's heads, right? And you cannot really automate things or make impact using Gen AI unless that knowledge is digitized. Well, now you have to spend time to digitize that knowledge, and then the value of the automation that you bring erodes. So it's sometimes proving the value proposition of the work is a hard thing when the knowledge is not digitized, right? That's one thing. I think people touched upon security. I would say the unreliability of Gen AI applications, right? You cannot guarantee that it's going to produce the same output all the time. There are, of course, ways to reduce hallucinations and so on, but there is still no way to completely eliminate that. And that makes it harder to earn the trust of the business stakeholders, right? That change management component becomes a little bit harder when you have unreliable systems. Right. So we'll move on. I think the next one is also kind of along the same lines. How can organizations integrate Gen AI into existing workflows to maximize the impact? Maybe, Ahmad, you want to start with that?
Sure. So I think maybe it's a multi-part answer. The way I think is, the first and the foremost thing is start small, start focused. Identify what are the use cases that have clear business drivers, clear business value, and essentially start focusing on that. And what that will do is, it will help you to learn what things work for Gen AI, for your organization, for the data that you have, and the privacy guidelines that you have, the data governance models that you have, etc. I think that's the first thing. Once you learn that, I think that's where you start building out this collaboration. Some organizations call it Center of Excellence. Some organizations would call it a different name, an AI center as an example. This is where you bring together people from different departments with different skill sets, and you start identifying what are these different use cases, what are these data sets that flow across the organization where you can collaborate to fully utilize this. And some of the learnings that would start coming out of this are things that you'll start forming, perhaps a privacy board or data governance board, because that will define out of all the assets that you generate or content that you generate through Gen AI may need to be moderated and looked over by a human person, as we talked about. Another thing that would come out of this is you would also identify technical considerations, things like, oh, I need a lot of compute power, and perhaps I may not have it. That will influence decisions about technology. And you want these decisions to have, you want to have these decisions when you have implemented smaller scale, looked at the value and the context for the whole organization, and let those decisions about privacy, technology, end user experience come through after that.
Yeah. Sergey?
Yeah, I think I agree in large part with everything that everyone has said so far. I think that ultimately you want to define a small, measurable use case that has clear business, internal or external business value, but I would probably start with something internal. Basically, it's just, can you make some internal operation be slightly faster by leveraging, or better in some way by leveraging this technology? That's where we've started. That's where I've tried to advocate starting working with Gen AI in the organization. Again, around metadata tagging, labeling. We also are doing some interesting work around identifying clippable content. So basically it's like internal, it's not really UGC, but it's clipping components of our library quickly, automatically, and not having human beings spend hours upon hours creating clips off of new content. So yeah, so there are things like that, like measurable internal business processes is probably your best bet in terms of getting use cases for Gen AI within your organization.
Gotcha. Becca, you want to add something?
Very similar. Start small. Start with, again, internal is where we've started. Also, clippable content is something that we're working on, particularly in the news space, because you got to get it out very quickly, right? And on multiple platforms, multiple distributions. So that's a place that we're starting. Another place is in video delivery. There are so many touch points between the video to the origin server to the ISPs, the content delivery networks, and trying to get to a place of surfacing any failure points and root cause issues as quickly as possible to identify impacted audiences and revenue. So that's another place that we've started on some of our smaller apps. But again, it's starting small and bringing more folks into the project. If it's just our team or just our team and the development team, even if we can show the win, it's tough to get the buy-in with the broader org.
Anything?
Yeah, I think I just want to add a couple of things, whatever my other panelists said. I would really focus on the low-hanging opportunities because Gen AI is a new topic for any organization, right? So to really win the confidence of your business users, I think if we can do something small, but yet show them the magic that it's going to create for them, that's, I think, definitely a win for any organization. So that's when you're really looking at integrating your existing workflows into the Gen AI models, right? So for example, to top it up what I said in the beginning, that the dashboard is a classic use case beyond chatbots that you may already be building using your data warehouse, right? So can you plug in Gen AI models on top of your data warehouse? And that's kind of going to show them what magic it can do on top of what they're already building, right? So that would be, I think, my take on this question.
Yeah, I think a lot of good thoughts. The one thing I would add is setting a clear expectation is also very important. So one thing I do as a part of my job is when I talk to people, especially in companies where they haven't done a whole lot of AI in the past, people have a notion of something that either works or doesn't work, right? They have been exposed to like deterministic systems that either work or don't work. If you turn on a switch, light comes on, okay. It's not the case that it comes on sometimes, doesn't come on sometimes. So I tend to set those expectations very early on that, look, you have to treat this as a unreliable intern that's going to work quite well for about 80% of times, but you cannot be completely unguarded. It has to be, you have to supervise it and provide the kind of like, you are the final decision maker on that one. And if you set that expectation clearly, I think people kind of like really come down to the expectations. And that basically I've seen where you can see so clear successes coming out. One thing that I would say maybe, again, when it comes to implementation of Gen AI, I think ethical considerations are very important, right? I would like to get panel's thoughts on that. What are some of the considerations that you have when it comes to implementing Gen AI from an ethics standpoint? Becca, you want to start?
Sure. Again, in media, particularly in news, we are storytellers, and news and entertainment. Scripps historically is what they would describe as big J journalism. So using Gen AI to create news content or news video we just don't want to go there. We don't want to introduce bias out into the marketplace. We don't want to create echo chambers. And this, for both news and entertainment, it's a value of ours to make sure we're surfacing stories from underrepresented communities. So we don't want to just leverage fully into information gathering and content creation without any, we've even experimented a little bit in news with Gen AI headlines, and it's still very experimental because we need an editor there to make sure we are not introducing bias into that realm.
Okay, so Ahmad and Sergey, I know you're on the next panel as well, so I'll spare you this question for you. Maybe Sachin, I'll go to you.
Yeah, so can you please repeat the question?
The ethical considerations in applying Gen AI.
Okay, I think in my mind, data privacy is one of the very important pieces of ethical considerations because we want to make sure we keep our data private. It's not being exposed to the outside world. Uh, and, uh, and to top it up, I would say that whatever contents you're creating from, let's say, from LLM, make sure that property is intellectual to that person and it's not been exploited. So I think those are the two important pieces I think in my mind are very important when we talk about ethics, because we don't want to steal someone's property and make it ours, right? So I think that's really important that we maintain that ethical consideration when we are using Gen AI.
Yeah, absolutely important. Great. All right. The next one is a very near and dear to my heart. Is how do you measure the ROI of Gen AI use cases, right? In many cases, I mean, if you are a leader, you have to start with the ROI. That's a common question you get asked, and would love to hear panel's thoughts on that one. Maybe Sergey, you want to start with?
Sure. I mean, I think ultimately you need to have really tactical, measurable outcomes in order to mark any experiment in your organization as a success. Because frankly, any Gen AI that you deploy in your organization is definitely going to be an experiment right now. So I would say it really has to be about defining measurable outcomes, measuring how large the size is. Like if this, whatever, again, this business process, which usually takes X number of hours, is that a large number of hours? Is it something that when you automate it or you make it so that a person is no longer monitoring or informing the decisions around it, but not nearly as much, is it overall valuable? Does it matter? You know, you could go in and do this really fancy thing that could have been fixed with, you know, classing machine learning, or maybe not even any machine learning. Maybe it's just a rules engine that you're building. So I mean, I think doing that it would be really valuable to measure ROI. And then if you do that, then you can see either how much money you save or how much money you wind up generating if you can add a dollar multiplier to that. Yep.
Ahmad?
The way I think about it is maybe three different types of maybe metrics for ROI. The first one is what I call Wall Street metric, which is essentially how much revenue do you produce, what is your cost, your P&L, your number of customers that you have, etc. I think if Gen AI influences those, that's very valuable for the organization. The second one, what I call is the company metric, which is Gen AI helping you become more efficient? Are the internal processes that are getting improved? Perhaps you were taking a long time to produce certain documents because you were creating them manually, and through Gen AI, you have been able to reduce that. So those are all internal metrics, but they ultimately do influence the Wall Street metrics, but the timeline by when they influence and how much is something depends on the organization's execution capability. And the third one, I call them industry metric, which is competitive differentiation. Does Gen AI give you that differentiation to stand out from the rest of the companies in your own industry, in your own segment, so that whenever new technology comes in, what happens is some companies tend to take advantage of it early and well, and others don't take advantage of it as well. Are we able to take advantage of that early and well, and would it help you to get that long-term advantage?
Becca?
Yes, measure. What are we trying, what's the goal, and what metric are we trying to influence? And yes, starting small. And again, to echo some of what Sergey was saying, it's, oh, sure, maybe we save time, but can you quantify that time, and can you put an expense on that time? And being able to have again, measure and have a concrete internal metric.
Sachin, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I think I want to talk about a couple use cases. One is in the medical field. So for example, let's say you have a sales rep who's visiting a doctor, and he would be probably maybe doing like 2 or 3 visits per day. But with Gen AI, I think if I had really checked the ROI on that, so probably the pre-call summary or the visit summary and the post-call summary, and then the next best action, those are some of the benefits that I think Gen AI can provide to the sales rep so that he can really plan his day or the next day for him to show the kind of productivity gain that he has shown using the Gen AI. So that's basically, again, to top what one of my other colleagues, friends said here. So it's really what is measurable, what is the impact you're going to create by using Gen AI that's of course the most important piece. And the second use case, which at least is very close to my heart, is the code generation. I think I talked about in the beginning that if my developers are spending lesser time in writing what they used to take longer time before, that's definitely my ROI, because whatever money I invested in bringing something that is going to help me in the code generation is definitely a good ROI for me, right? So those are the two use cases which I think are very close to me.
Yeah. Yeah, one challenge I face in this particular thing is if you think about a particular, I guess, job, right? It has a bunch of tasks, right? And certain tasks are very, I guess, good candidates for using Gen AI, right? But typically, there are no measurements so far by each task, right? And you cannot people to ask or enter time for each of the tasks, right? So that before picture, getting that before picture is typically always very hard. I'm not sure if you guys have any thoughts on like how to solve that problem, or how you have solved that problem.
No.
Not yet, but now you've given us the problem, we'll think about it.
Okay, what role Gen AI can play in product design, research, and development? I think this is where I think Ahmad, you touched upon, but I'll start with Becca.
Yes, so actually we are researchers at heart. We do on my broader team a bunch of consumer research as well. So actually, to piggyback on your last question, Amit, we have been using LLMs on all of our qualitative data that comes back. So open-end survey responses, or app reviews, or any kind of qualitative information. And we actually had a couple of our analysts go through and analyze as they would go through open-end text, and then we went and ran a couple LLMs on what would happen if it could summarize and surface the themes directly. And we were able to save about 30 hours. So that's a small win, but to your point, it was actually having somebody sit down and say, it takes me this long to do this, and this, and this. And then there is still a human element of hand-holding, making sure that the themes are actually representative of what's in the text. But we are using that today as a small step in our any consumer-facing research that we're doing.
Ahmad, do you want to add more to your answer up there?
I think that was a really good example. I think it's my personal point of view. The Gen AI has a lot of potential impact in early stages of your, I would say, when you're thinking about doing research and design, the impact is significantly large as compared to when you're close to execution, especially because that is where you have a lot of different thoughts, a lot of brainstorming ideas, a lot of those different things that you can't just automate. So you can't just implement a simple machine learning algorithm. You can't implement any other automation. You need context, you need creativity. And I think there's a lot of promise. I'm not saying that Gen AI can do it now, but I think there's significant promise in early stage R&D and design.
Sergey, anything to add?
I think that right now, when it comes to Gen AI, you need to really be certain. I think you should really bound where it does anything when it comes to creative tasks. I think that the constraints should be set pretty strongly for something like that. I'm still of the old school belief that because this thing does not have any kind of a world model, it's going to be rehashing the things. At the end of the day, it's like a really, really, really complicated Kalman filter on all the data that you put into it. Like that's what this thing is. And so I would just be very wary, is what I would say.
Yeah, I guess one use case that I've seen that is quite good in the area of R&D is in the space of knowledge management, where in the past, if you think about typical labs, I used to work for a manufacturing company and I've seen that firsthand, where a lot of the experiments that happen, especially in the material science space, the output is kept in some SQL databases or in some Excel spreadsheets, right? And many times, actually, that past knowledge is not leveraged when they build on the new materials or new experiments. And using one of the use cases that we were trying to use large language models for was to actually do the knowledge management using large language models, where we train the large language models or use the RAG systems to basically build that knowledge into the system, and therefore we build on top of that and not kind of like start from scratch. We'll move on. How can Gen AI support innovation in areas like education, creativity, and entertainment? I guess, Becca, we'll start with you.
Sure. So we touched on it a little bit earlier that, and Sergey said the same thing, really in clipping our content. We're great, especially in news, at getting a lot of video, but trying to get that down and pair it into what would go on social, what would go on the website, getting it into a VOD asset versus a video on demand versus something live. I see that. It's with news editor guidance. So not on its, we're not going to let it clip and go run. We still want a human making sure that the story is unbiased and intact. So that's one that we're looking at. And I mean, that extends to entertainment content as well. But getting to a place where we can very quickly take content and package it and surface it in different distribution platforms.
Sergey?
Yeah, so for us, so clipping, the other thing is actually finding ad breaks. That's an interesting place where we're finding success. So the idea is you have, whatever, an hour-long novella. You want to figure out where between minutes, let's say 8 and 15, 23 and 30, and then 40 and 60, do you insert an ad? And so, and again, based on what's on the screen, what's happening, you could also potentially make it so that the ad is relevant relative to what had just happened, right? So that's we think is a very, very interesting use case. I really like this idea of making the LLM be the intermediary amongst a bunch of like different databases or systems that you have. I think that's actually a really insightful and interesting way to leverage LLMs to connect all of the knowledge in your organization. I mean, we aren't really there yet to be able to even do anything like that, at least internally. And then the other thing, again, I mean, it's just tagging and enrichment of whatever assets you have. And because we have a lot of audio-visual assets, there's lots of opportunity there.
Ahmad? Anything?
I think we had the content experts here. I really could not add anything beyond. Okay. We heard from Becca. I think your point earlier about knowledge management, I think that has a lot of promise, especially if we are able to bring it and tailor it to education. Because we know nowadays, like earlier, people used to go in school, specialize in one particular area, and then they are going to intern industry, work in that area, and they're going to spend their life just working in that area. Things are changing. You need to know a lot more about subjects that are adjacent to you, things that impact that subject. And therefore, it's, I think, knowledge management, ability to learn aspects that are not just about your area, but surrounding areas as part of a curriculum, even as an aid, could be really, really valuable. That, I think, if we could take that particular idea and think about how to apply that to education to enhance the curriculum, I think that could be a value.
Great. Sachin?
Yeah, I think I just want to add to top of what they said. So I come from a solution building background. So my passion always being like a full stack developer, where I'm able to do everything from front end to back end and the middleware engineering, right? So I think to what Ahmad said, it's really important that the professional gains knowledge across all the platform and just not be in one particular area. So I think that's what in the educational pieces of Gen AI is going to help professionals gain that across platform competency, and then they make themselves really valuable in the market, right? So than just being a back-end or front-end developer. So I think that's really an important aspect of Gen AI. I think today's professionals should be leveraging on to upskill themselves and then see what contribution they can make to the industry.
Yeah, I can give one example in the education space. Actually, was in a conference, and Sal Khan from Khan Academy actually came there. And they are actually using Gen AI in the Khan Academy, I guess the app that they have, where a person, if he wants to solve a problem, right, the basically Gen AI bot helps them along the way. So it basically tells them the steps and tries to see if they can take the next step onwards. If they get stuck on the next step, it kind of like helps the students to move on forward. I really like that use case. I think the way thinking that they had behind was really good. So if you have any kids or have any children in your life, I would recommend them to try that out. I think I felt it's really impactful. Okay, well, I guess we'll move to our last question. This is a lightning round question. And the question is this: in just a few words, what's the most promising Gen AI use case that organizations should explore next? Sachin?
Yeah, I think to me, one of the key area I think is the content creation, because Gen AI can be very dynamic in creating what you're trying to create, than using your own time in kind of creating a varieties of that content. For example, I was just reading about there are helmets, the bike helmets, that you can just design the way you want, right? So for example, you want to have a particular theme on that. So Gen AI can just quickly do that for you instead of you having to manually design each and every piece of the helmet by just using those themes. So I think content creation in my mind is the best use case that we should be leveraging.
I mean, agreed, definitely. That's our business. Definitely in the editing space. How do we package something down for different distribution types, and getting content and reliable quality video in front of the right consumer at the right time.
Sachin?
I would just say summarization and enrichment.
That was a really good answer. I would add design, whether you are doing drug design, whether it's material design, whether it's chemical design. I think design could be a really valuable area.
Yeah, I think I would add two more. The agents, I think I talked about those. They are not good yet, but I feel like next year you're going to see really good agents coming out, and they are going to be part of our work, very integral part of our work. And second is, when we talk about Gen AI, we talk about large language models, but there are now multimodal LLMs coming out where they have the ability to see things. We are actually using some of the multimodal LLMs, and I'm seeing a remarkably improvement in those things. I mean, the previous versions were really bad, and now they have gone they are not perfect yet, but they have gone really high at this point in terms of performance. So I would say those two things. Okay. But with that, that's pretty much end of the panel. Thank you everyone. I appreciate your thoughts, and we learned a lot from it.